First, I'd like to acknowledge the events of yesterday, Mr Deputy Speaker. What we saw yesterday is our democracy in action. The result of yesterday's vote is a more democratic parliament, a more progressive parliament, and a parliament that can truly reflect the will of the Tasmanian people. It is a reminder that no government can take the parliament or the people for granted. Being elected is only half the battle. What really makes a difference is being able to govern in the interests of all Tasmanians. The Premier is on notice. He cannot treat the Parliament like a rubber stamp. He must consult genuinely and widely with the community to deliver on his agenda. My commitment is that the Labor Party will work constructively with the government to make this a productive and progressive Parliament. We have shown in the past that when the government puts up good legislation that is evidence-based and has the support of the community, we will vote for it. What drives us is securing good outcomes for the people of Tasmania. To that end, we will not be afraid to pursue our own legislative reform agenda, Mr Deputy Speaker, and that we will start with a comprehensive suite of transparency reforms, which the government was unwilling to support in the previous Parliament. Tasmanians are crying out to see comprehensive state-based donation disclosure laws so that they can see who is buying influence in the Tasmanian political process. Never again can we have an election where the size of your chequebook determines your number of seats in the Parliament. Mr Deputy Speaker, we need to see a new code of conduct introduced for all members of Parliament. We need to ensure that the right to information requests are an absolute last resort because we want a government that willingly shares information and that the process is free from political interference. It is only through openness and transparency that the public can truly have confidence in their elected representatives. And it is only through proper consultation and proving that we make decisions on behalf of the people we are elected to serve that the cynicism people have about politicians can be overcome. Mr Deputy Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of all those who contributed to the running of the Labor campaign. All of the candidates, their campaign teams, our federal colleagues, our state secretary, our affiliated unions, our rank and file members, the hundreds of volunteers and the staff in my office and all of the electorate officers. You worked tirelessly and with such dedication and passion, and I thank you so much for all of those hours, the emails, the phone calls, the conversations that all helped to get us to where we are today. And of course, the thousands of Tasmanians who put their trust in us by casting their number one vote for Labor. Thank you for your efforts and for helping Labor win more seats in the Parliament and achieve a statewide swing in our favour. We weren't successful on this occasion, Mr Deputy Speaker, but we can hold our heads high, knowing that we campaigned with integrity and with decency. Ours is a collective movement, fuelled by dedication and passion of so many who want a fairer and more equal society. I would like to congratulate the new members of Parliament on their election. There are 6 new members of the Labor caucus and I am thrilled to be working with them, who together with our Legislative Council members give us as many members in this Parliament as the Liberal government. I want to acknowledge the huge efforts and commitments to their respective electorates of Jen Butler, my colleague in Lyons, Ella Haddad, Jennifer Houston, David O'Byrne and, who's not here, hello, and Alison Standen. And I would also like to welcome to the chamber Sue Hickey. I wish each of you well and know that you are here because you truly care about making Tasmania a better place. We are all here at the goodwill of our electorate first and foremost and act on their behalf until such time as they determine we won't. And on that note, I would like to reflect on the departure of the members who were unsuccessful in their re-election efforts this time. Madeline Ogilvie, our Labor colleague and former member for Denison, Andrea Dawkins, Nick Street and Joan Ryler. I cannot imagine how it must feel to lose your seat, but I do know what it feels like to lose an election. And I pass on my sincere commiserations and hope that you have good support around you from those who know you best and that each of you is looking forward to new adventures. So here we are, the 25 of us, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Greens diminished and wanting for a cause. The Liberal government returned but wounded by their actions throughout the campaign with their poor decision-making on critical issues.
Ms O'Connor, order. Order.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Labor Party returned with more members and reinvigorated team who will hold this government to account with more tenacity and determination than you can even begin to imagine, because there is a lot to fight for. We proudly campaigned on health and it remains our #1 priority. There can be no essential service more important that impacts on more people across our state than healthcare. When I reflect on the stories of the hundreds of individuals who've shared their anguish at the time that their loved ones have waited in the emergency department, the frustration at the lack of available mental health services, the anxiety about ramping at the hospitals, the pain endured due to long waits for an outpatient appointment, the denial of services for women needing a termination in the public health system, the exhaustion of health workers who are at their wits' ends, I cannot but feel compelled to challenge the government to do better, to be better. The health system needs more funding now, not in 6 years' time. We need more beds now, not in 6 years' time. It is the Liberal government's fault that we're in this position. It is due to their mismanagement and their chronic underfunding of the health system that we are facing dire circumstances in our hospital. Think about the loss of accreditation, ambulances ramped, people waiting for days in the emergency department because there aren't enough beds. The Labor Party provided a fully costed health policy at the election that was designed to provide relief for those relying on our health system from day one of an elected Labor government. Our policy only included state funding, unlike the Liberals who bolstered their health policy with $200 million of federal funding and tried to pass it off as their own until they were caught out. The Liberals' health policy was exposed for its cynical attempt at buying votes by the former Chief of Staff to the Premier, Brad Stansfield, who wrote about it, amongst other things, after the election in a self-inflated ramble that, and I quote, "We were able to gazump it at our campaign launch 2 weeks later with our superior health policy." So the Liberals waited for Labor to launch our health policy, matched it, added a little extra, and then thought that their biggest problem was solved. You have no shame. There are people who have been crying out for years for this government to listen and provide more resources, and the Liberals ignored them until on the eve of an election. And even then, it wasn't their cries for help they responded to, but polling and a Labor health policy. Shame on you, Premier. The Liberals' cynical brand of politics is all that people in our community despise. Their shallow rhetoric and poll-driven approach is and has put lives at risk. People have died because of the decisions made by this government, but even that wasn't enough to prompt them to do something about it. They are motivated purely by political self-interest, and they are the worst kind of politician, Mr Deputy Speaker. Seemingly daily, our ambulances are ramped in the hallways of the Royal Hobart Hospital, the Hodgman wing and the Ferguson wing. Did you know that they called those corridors after the two of you? As the Minister leaves the chamber, Minister for Health, Ferguson says, just as well we open those beds. Tell that to the ambulance staff who were ramped yesterday at the hospital, at the Royal Hobart Hospital. 63 patients waiting in the emergency department, not just the Hodgman wing and the Ferguson wing, the corridors in the hospital used for patients on trolleys, but a new wing, another corridor, the Gutwin wing it's being called now, opened because there aren't enough beds. And the arrogance of the Health Minister, who just left the chamber, making that snide remark, is not lost on those health workers and those patients who are today probably wondering where those beds are that the Minister alludes to. The esteem of the Minister for Health is matched only by that of the Roger Yench tent city at the showgrounds, that the Minister finally found the location of 16 days after it was first brought to his attention as a Deputy Speaker. 16 days. And in case honourable members opposite have missed it, there is now an Occupy movement on the lawns of Parliament House, with tents pitched and homeless Tasmanians living right outside this building because they have nowhere else to go. I'm not sure if you've spoken to any of the people camped out the front of this building, but you should. Don't leave it 16 days. Mr Deputy Speaker, Tasmanians deserve better than a government that employs shallow spin designed to get through the next media cycle. We deserve politicians with courage and conviction, politicians who live the day-to-day alongside their fellow neighbours, not looking down on them from on high. We want a fair society. We want a quality health system, a good public housing system, a quality public education system, a chance at a job that is secure and meaningful, investment in infrastructure that will set our state up, not just roads and bridges, but renewable energy generation, telecommunications networks, and ways to bring people together. A fairness agenda is a good economic agenda. When governments look after people, the economy does better. A fairness agenda is about making sure people can access essential services like health, education, housing, and get a secure job. Investing in people, investing in what's fair, and it is an investment in a better future. We have a responsibility to tackle inequality, to stand up for the voiceless, to make decisions that improve the well-being of our entire community, not just the well-being of a few. And these are the areas where this Liberal government is failing, Mr Deputy Speaker. Tasmanians don't want a secretive and deceptive government. Unfortunately, these characteristics are the hallmarks of this Hodgman Liberal government. The deals for mates, the hidden policies, the lack of transparency about who donated to the Liberal Party and how much and what do they want for that donation, and the blatant way in which the Liberals act in their own political self-interest and not in the public's best interest. The Premier has earned himself a new nickname, Dodgy Hodgie. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, said in his address to Congress last week, and I quote, "Without reason, without truth, there is no real democracy, because democracy is about true choices and rational decisions. The corruption of information is an attempt to corrode the very spirit of our democracies." The Liberal Party should reflect upon this and be held to account for the way in which they campaigned in Tasmania and the way they manipulated information in order to gain political advantage. It's fair to say that this is the best government that money could buy. And let's talk about poker machines and the blatant attempt by the Liberal Party to scare Tasmanians into thinking that 5,000 jobs were at risk if poker machines were removed from pubs and clubs. They lied, Mr Deputy Speaker. To demonstrate the depths of their deception, reflect on a Facebook post made from Alice Wood-Jones shortly after Labor announced its poker machine policy. Alice Wood-Jones, sound familiar? "There goes my brother's job," Alice posted. Famously, outrageously, Alice Wood-Jones didn't exist. It was a troll profile controlled by a senior member of the Premier's own staff.
Absolutely. No one else knew that.
Make no mistake, this practice of government-sponsored trolling was orchestrated and widespread. Where is Gary Boak?
Yeah.
Where is Brent Smith?
Yeah.
Where have they gone now?
That's where they've gone.
No election to campaign in. They must be, I don't know, gone to work somewhere else, Mr Deputy Speaker. But when the government was caught red-handed, it simply swept the matter under the carpet. The government's own SEIS report estimated there are less than 400 direct jobs in gaming, and even then there was no tangible evidence presented to say those jobs would be lost in 2023 when arrangements changed. Even Saul Eslake labelled the Liberals' claims ridiculous. But they continued to corrupt information, and in doing so, they eroded the spirit of our democracy. Will Hodgman should hang his head in shame for the way he allowed big business to corrupt the Tasmanian Liberal Party and, by extension, our community with their lies about job losses, their use of staff, many whom were casuals with no job security and no power to say no, to push their propaganda wearing T-shirts, handing out pamphlets, adorning their buildings with banners and sending letters to customers telling them how to vote. The Liberal tactics were deceitful, and whilst they might have won more seats, Mr Deputy Speaker, they sure didn't win respect.
Order. Members on our left should stop interjecting on their leader. Order. Order. Ms White has the call.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Liberal tactics were deceitful, and whilst they might have won more seats, they sure didn't win respect. And this is one issue that is not over yet. Have government members even read your own SEIS report published in January this year? Another report that was hidden until we called for its release. It tells a story of an increase in the prevalence of at-risk gamblers with no reduction in the number of people playing poker machines today compared with 3 years ago. It tells us that half of the money being spent on poker machines is from at-risk or problem gamblers. Disturbingly, it also shows that for 18 to 24-year-olds, poker machines were the most common gambling activity. This is a problem that is not going away. But the Liberals continue to deny the truth in favour of pro-pokey rhetoric that disregards the enormous social and economic harm these machines cause our community, our families and our friends. The Liberals' gaming policy will make problem gambling worse. The government's collusion with the poker machine industry and its collusion with vested interests will be recorded as a dark chapter in Tasmanian political history. Labor was not prepared to ignore the fact that in the last financial year, Tasmanians lost $110 million on poker machines in pubs and clubs. Labor believes this is money that will be better spent in our communities, supporting small businesses and families. And I was not prepared to ignore the evidence presented by experts like economics professor John Mangan, showing that if just half of those losses from poker machines were diverted to other parts of the economy, more than 180 full-time jobs would be created. The Hodgman government, and specifically Treasurer Peter Gutwin, were instead prepared to collude and try to discredit this credible evidence. We accept and understand that for every person who is harmed by their own gambling, 7 other people are affected. Labor was prepared to take a bold stand and remove these harmful and addictive machines from our towns and communities and restrict them to casinos. My position, Labor's position, on problem gambling and poker machines has not changed and will not change. We are not prepared to ignore the clear and compelling evidence and do nothing. How many of you opposite can say the same thing? But the desperation of the Liberal Party to win the 2018 election doesn't stop with their willful ignorance of gambling addiction, Mr Deputy Speaker. They displayed a stunning lack of honesty about what people were even voting for, with 200 policies not even revealed prior to the election. Most significantly of these were changes to the firearms laws only leaked the day before polling day, changes that do breach the National Firearms Agreement. There is no honesty there and no ability for voters to make rational decisions when they are denied even the most basic of information. The lack of truth about the fiscal position of the state budget and the ease with which the Premier was happy to dole out taxpayer dollars in the most extraordinary display of pork barrelling with all of the crackling was stunning. I condemn the government's stubborn refusal to shift from an austerity budget approach when it comes to the wages of teachers and nurses and other public sector workers, while at the same time trumpeting the improvements across the economy and regaling such success to your own budget management. Tasmanians' cost of living is going up faster than the government's own wages policy. In real terms, Tasmanians subject to the government's wages policy will be worse off. With the growing inequality, stagnating wages and difficulties recruiting to fill vacancies, the strategies of this Liberal government leave no doubt in my mind that the ability of our state to continue to deliver essential services is severely compromised. After pledging $2.7 billion worth of promises to the Tasmanian public this election, the Liberal government have a lot of explaining to do. They have woken up with one hell of a spending hangover and their forecast budget surplus is slim and dependent upon rating GBEs who just last year said such windfalls were not likely. So what will they cut to pay for their promises, Mr Deputy Speaker? What essential services will they continue to chronically underfund to hide the fact that they misled Tasmanians about their ability to manage the budget? Their trickery and deceit is not limited to cooking the books. Let's talk again about the use of troll accounts by staffers in the Premier's own office, on the taxpayer dollar. And may I remind the House again about the quote I shared earlier. The corruption of information is an attempt to corrode the very spirit of our democracies, and condemn the Premier for allowing such a practice to occur and thrive on his watch. The use of troll accounts was used not just to influence people's opinions on social media by commenting on articles or posts, but going so far as to threaten the jobs of people who raise their voices in opposition to government policy. And not just any government policy, but policy that restricts the ability of women in this state to access a legal medical procedure in the public health system.
Absolutely.
Did the Premier realise what he was saying when he ruled out providing access to terminations of pregnancy in the public health system, ignorant of the fact that they have long been performed there? Or was he swayed by the pressure from those in his party ideologically opposed to a woman having full agency of her body? Either way, he's been too weak to stand up and show leadership to fix the problem that has resulted in tens of women each week being forced to fly to Melbourne at the most vulnerable time in their life. Shame on you, Premier. How dare you stand in judgment and deny access for women to a legal medical procedure just because you don't have the courage to stand up to your Health Minister, Michael Ferguson, and pull him into line?
Pro-choice when it suits you.
The deceit of this Liberal government is not just confined to ideological issues, Mr Deputy Speaker, but to mainstream concerns like education. The audit of TasTAFE remains secret, despite the Education Minister saying it would be released publicly. Compound this lack of transparency with the other hallmarks of this government, ignorance of growing inequality and gold medal media spin, and you get the trifecta. While Will Hodgman and Peter Gutwin are happily spruiking Tasmania's economic growth in areas such as building and construction, they are actively ignoring the underlying fact that while the big end of town is enjoying the dividends, tens of thousands of Tasmanians are missing out. Tasmania has lost 1,800 apprentices and training places over the past 4 years. It's that chronic lack of apprenticeships and mysterious shortfall in the training places that they cannot explain and they will not talk about. They will not address Tasmania's stubbornly low participation rate, and they're happy to avoid addressing the fact that Tasmania's youth unemployment remains amongst the highest in the country. They will not talk about the clear fact that thousands of Tasmanians remain without secure full-time work, and they are doing nothing to restore confidence and create rewarding and secure employment for those Tasmanians. What is clear is what we have to do is to go back to the beginning, take a serious look at our education and training systems and establish what has gone so very wrong. To get to the bottom of this situation does require investigation by a parliamentary inquiry. A parliamentary inquiry will help us understand why this state is in real danger of falling short of workers within only a handful of years if no new workers are trained. I challenge the Liberal government to work in a bipartisan manner to establish this inquiry and to help all Tasmanians understand why apprentice positions have disappeared on their watch and to establish where the training dollars have gone. It is all very well to be trumpeting growth in areas such as residential and commercial construction, but serious questions need to be answered about why apprentice numbers have not grown at the same time and in fact have gone backwards. Who is responsible for the enforcement of the building and construction training policy for government procurement that requires contractors and subcontractors to use apprentices for 20% of the labour required on-site and off-site for work undertaken on Tasmanian government contracts? Because it is not working. It is not being enforced. If we are to fill the jobs of tomorrow, the only way to understand the mistakes of the past and to rebuild our workforce is to provide the opportunity for all stakeholders to put their statements on public record and then adequately plan for the future. Mr Deputy Speaker, I look at the faces of those opposite and you already look tired. Public life can be tough, but it's for good reason, Mr Deputy Speaker. You look tired.
Order.
It's a tough life, but it's for good reason, Mr Deputy Speaker. People want to know that you're in it for the right reasons and that your decisions as a government will make their lives better. You have got to make a difference and you've got to act with conviction and a good heart. The faces of those opposite, Mr Deputy Speaker, look tired because they're going through the motions but they don't believe it. They don't believe it. They don't believe in inequality. If you did, you would... they don't believe in equality because if you did, you would promote equality of rights for women. You don't believe in fairness. If you did, you would address the growing inequality in our society rather than promoting that divide through handouts to business over services to vulnerable Tasmanians and fair wages to working people. You don't believe in social justice. If you did, you would properly resource our child safety services, our hospitals, our schools, public housing and our justice system so people could get the support they needed when they need it. You don't truly believe in the important role of the state in helping people. You get caught up in thinking the market will respond and government is just along for the ride, but it's not the case. And that is why you are tired. Your theory isn't working in practice, and people are hurting, and you don't have the answers because your ideology is broken. Madam Speaker, Labor, on the other hand, is revived. We are bigger, we are stronger, and we are ready to show the Tasmanian community the government they could have. My team is energised and hungry, and together we will stand up for our communities and make sure that the services Tasmanians rely upon are not further eroded by this Liberal government. We are here to demonstrate to Tasmanians that our brand is worth protecting, that the uniqueness that is the Tasmanian way of life is worth celebrating, that our competitive advantages in renewable energy generation, agricultural production, aquaculture, caring for one another and our strong sense of community are all things that we can be proud of. We can make a difference to the life of every child in our state with a sustained focus on the early years, with a keen resolve to ensure every family with a child under 5 is given every chance to engage, be included and succeed. We need to take more seriously risks to brand reputation that come from biosecurity incursions and the risks these incursions place on our primary producers and their ability to access markets and promote Tasmanian-grown produce around the world. We need to compete on quality, and the best way we can do this is by investing in our people and investing in training and apprenticeships across a range of sectors to help grow the potential of our citizens and increase the skills of people of all ages who build our houses, who greet our tourists, who grow our vegetables, who cook our seafood and who support our community and grow the Tasmanian brand. Madam Speaker, we will put people first and make sure that those people who are waiting for healthcare or public housing or public education have a champion in Labor. Labor will stand up for Tasmania in Canberra. We will argue for our fair share of GST, of health funding, of education funding, of housing funding, of infrastructure funding, and make sure that despite there being no Tasmanian around the Liberal cabinet table, that our voice is heard. I love this place, Madam Speaker. It's my home, and I'm personally invested in making sure that my family, my friends, my community, my state gets a fair go. As distressing as it may be to know that there is a Liberal Conservative government in power, we will hold them to account each and every day. The last 12 months have strengthened my resolve to advocate for the rights of those who have no voice in decision-making and to ensure that essential services that underpin our community are properly resourced. The Liberals might have won the election, but they didn't beat us. And there are more rising up behind us every day because we hope for a better future for our children than what's on offer right now. Madam Speaker, the makeup of this Parliament means we have the opportunity to progress an agenda that is bold, that is progressive and that puts people first. And I have never been more determined in my life to make sure Tasmanians get the outcomes from us as their elected officials that they deserve as I am today.